What started as a bright sunny morning on the island of Sodor would end in a nightmare that Lucy, the Scottish LB and SCRE1, would not soon forget. In the small town of Norfolk, Lucy was on her way to take a light goods train to Fort Laughlin. She would normally go along the branch line that led to her destination. But due to a fallen tree on the line as a result of a storm that hit the area the day before, Lucy wasn't going anywhere. Then, Lucy spotted another set of rails on her line that appeared to lead somewhere else.
"Hey,"
chimed Lucy.
"why don't we go down those rails?"
It's the old line that runs through Kelstein," said her driver. "But when did it reopen?"
"What do you mean?"
questioned the Scottish tank engine. "Never mind. We're going to be late. Come on, let's take this route today. It'll take us straight to Fort Laughlin," replied the driver. Lucy proceeded down the line, and things were going quite well. Lucy was making good time and was predicting an early arrival to her destination. Just up ahead, Lucy's driver spotted a tunnel. It was a small tunnel that looked like it was constructed over a century ago. Lucy's driver stared at the tunnel for a little bit before he quickly told the locomotive, "All right, let's get this over with quickly." Lucy was confused, but she just carried along and was soon inside. The tunnel was very damp, and it produced a strong echo for even the quietest of noises. Lucy's driver began to feel nervous for an unknown reason. The tunnel was eerily constructed in a way to where, despite it being a straight path for the most part, the oddly misshapen walls and roof made it look like there was no end. Soon, Lucy's wheels began to squeak on the rails, and the tunnel only amplified the noise with an absolutely harrowing echo. Now, Lucy's driver was almost panicking, and as soon as he heard the sound of small rocks falling to the ground, he slammed open the regulator, and Lucy began to speed up rapidly. Now Lucy was frightened. "What's wrong? What's happening?" The driver didn't respond and just kept speeding her up. At last, he could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and before they knew it, they were out. Lucy's driver was panting, trying to catch his breath. Then, he smiled and let out a sigh of relief. Lucy demanded her driver tell her what that was all about. The driver ignored her and said just loud enough for the locomotive to hear, "Looks like the tunnel wasn't feeling it today." Lucy was again confused. The driver quickly looked up before he began to space out. "Oh, sorry. I was just remembering that event that happened back in '08. Kinda spooked me while we were in there."
"What happened back in '08?
Lucy replied. "What? I'm a little surprised that you've never heard of the Kelstein tunnel incident. It was a widely remembered and discussed event for decades. Here, I have a copy of the written accounts of the driver who witnessed the event. Now don't go around thinking I'm some kind of creep or really an undercover detective by night." These pages were copied and shared amongst the staff after they were discovered in order to gain a complete understanding of what exactly happened. Here's where it began. Stephen Porter's the name, and if anyone reads this, take it as a sincere warning. I had a pretty stable life in the Northeast, and I was proud to be working as an engine driver on the railway. I couldn't complain. The pay was decent, and it definitely put bread on the table. And I met my best friend George Hanley, who was my fireman. I was especially proud to be the driver of a small London and South Western Railway 330 class named Nikolai. Nikolai was a chipper fellow, always had a smile on his face and almost never felt any sort of negative emotions.
Him, George, and I would routinely carry slate from the quarry through the branch line connecting Norfolk and Fort Laughlin. It was a fairly basic task, and it didn't require any specific skills and knowledge. Yet, it never once felt monotonous, because both George and Nikolai made the back and forth journeys interesting, and they never failed to keep me in a positive mood. One cloudy morning, however, there was a slight change of plans. The tracks we usually took that ran through the branch line were blocked due to a landslide. It would have taken all day to clear up the mess, so we had to take a detour. Luckily, there was another line that ran through the small town of Kelstein that would take us straight to Fort Laughlin. There couldn't have been a better detour, and Nikolai was eager to go down that line if it possibly meant getting to our destination quicker. We switched points and started down the old line. The tracks were quite buckled, which was expected as the line was very old. Soon, we started approaching vastly overgrown shrubbery and tree branches. Those tree branches were like skeleton fingers and were a hassle to get through. Nikolai began to feel a little uneasy, but he quickly shook it off. We continued until we approached a tunnel. Nikolai slowly came to a stop with a slight shudder. Now, this tunnel looked to me and George like every other average tunnel, but aged and weak. However, Nikolai must have sensed something we couldn't, because when I got out and walked up in front to check on him, I saw something that confirmed that things were indeed very wrong. His face. I'll never forget his face. It was like he had just seen the devil himself. We haven't even entered the tunnel yet. After quite some time, he managed to raise enough pressure to get moving. Nikolai was still talking about how he didn't want to go into the tunnel, and truth be told, I myself began to feel as if there was something not right about this tunnel. But by that point, it was too late. Before we knew it, we were already inside with a fair amount of distance away from the entrance. We proceeded through the eerie tunnel tremendously slow, and I was at the point where I was praying we would make it out alive. But all my hope vanished after what happened next. There was an almighty groan above us, and with a loud bang, I saw a brick bounce off of Nikolai's tanks. First one, then 3, then 10. The tunnel was caving in. As I turned to my firemen, great masses of earth began filling Nikolai's camp, and the force of the soil pushed me out. The last thing I saw was the locomotive screech to a halt amidst the bank of earth. Soon, the rest of the tunnel collapsed in on us. I had the idea to get under the locomotive as that area was cleared. Of course, it was easier said than done. I had to get out and under the firebox quickly before I was buried alive. Luckily, I got under the chassis just in time. Can't say the same for George. I couldn't see him on the floor next to me, so I just knew he wasn't so lucky. I could hear Nikolai's muffled, haunting screams of horror and agony from under him as he was slowly being consumed by the soil. How I wished I could do something about it, but I had no choice but to leave him. I looked ahead and noticed a clear path the goods train made. I decided to crawl my way out under the trucks, but I had to move quickly or the weight of the soil would prove too much for the train and I would be crushed in an instant. It was a miracle that I made it out just in time, and I actually felt a wave of relief, but not for long, because when I finally crawled out of the tunnel, I heard a loud explosion. It only took me a moment to realize what had happened. Poor Nikolai. His boiler couldn't take the strain. That afternoon, many people came running up to me and were just dying to know everything that had happened. I tried to push them all away because I really didn't want to talk about it at all. I didn't want to relive the horror and tragedy of losing not only Nikolai, but my closest friend George a second time. I tried to forget everything, but no matter how hard I tried, every time I close my eyes, every time I am deep in thought, I can still see the look of abject terror on George's face before he was crushed to death by the falling debris. I could also still hear Nikolai's muffled screams ringing out of the tunnel. It's all just too much to bear. I might even go insane. I hope that hellish tunnel as well as the entire line got closed down for good. I don't want anyone else to have to suffer a worse fate than mine. If the line remains open in the future, please, I beg you, don't take a chance and go down that line, let alone that godforsaken tunnel. It's a ticking time bomb, just waiting to cave in once again from the weak roofing.
That was the last entry recovered of driver Stephen Porter's journal. Mr. Porter didn't show up for work the following morning, nor the day after. Eventually, it had been several weeks since he was seen last, and people were beginning to speculate on Stephen's whereabouts. Some say he resigned and moved to a different location. Others thought he had committed suicide, being unable to live with what has happened. That seemed to be the most plausible theory, but of course no one can be certain. We were lucky this time, Lucy. That tunnel could have gave up on top of us as well. It's so troubling to think about it now, but I just can't stop. The events all line up. The fact that both his and our usual routes were obstructed, and we both went down the same line that was supposedly safe. Yet here I am right now, talking to you. We made it out by slim chance. We were so very close to proving Stephen's right, and would have suffered the same fate as George and Nikolai, if not worse. We almost died today because of that damn tunnel.